So, hi everyone. I'd like to welcome you on the next Cloud Native Prague Meetup. Today, the topic will be the Cloud Native development. So we will be speaking in panel discussion about developing the apps which are running in the cloud. So, who I am? I'm the Cloud Native ambassador for Czech Republic. So it means that I'm helping the CNCF to spread the brand in our country. I'm doing in my free time, of course. So, what is the CNCF? Maybe you know Kubernetes, Argo, Prometheus, and tools like this. These tools are developed by the community, by committers, and this organization is helping these companies to find these contributors and also provide them some environment and help them to improve their application. So there are a lot of tools which they are in the landscape. Most of them are open source. It's a requirement if you wanted to help by CNCF. So this is the local event, but there is also one big event which is happened twice per year. One time in Europe and one time in US. It's a KubeCon. I hope that everybody knows it. So I think it's after Earbird right now, but you can still register there, and you can use this discount code. It's shared only for the community. So the QR code is just for the registration. There is no the discount code, right? You have to so you have to put it there. So, but feel free. I think it's 15% discount. So, and this time it's happened in Europe, I mean next year, so I hope that I can see some of you there. Maybe I'd like to also say something about our community. So we have the page, which is the cloudnativeprague.cz. You can subscribe there for upcoming events. We have there also Slack, if you wanted to communicate with other members. We have YouTube, where all of these records are there. And also, if you wanted to organize these events and at your space, or if you wanted to speak, like the panelists or as a common speaker for some presentation, or if you wanted to support us in some way, so there is the involvement URL where you can reach us via Google form. So we have some partners and also sponsor. Our sponsor is the Web Globe, which has provided us the DNS records and domain, just a domain registration. And also we have some partners like PyCon community, Golang community, also the DevOps, and also the KCD. KCD is the conference, which I'm also one of the organizers. It was mainly about the Kubernetes, but it's right now it's more about the cloud native stuff at all. So we will announce it in January, the next conference, which will happen in Prague. It will be in June. So you are the first who knows it. So feel free to check our channels like the LinkedIn and also community page where we will share the information about the conference when we will launch it. I'd like to also thanks Apify, which provide us this amazing space and also some food and drinks. Feel free to keep some beers. There's it. And so thank you. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, there will be pizza after the talk. Yeah. I wanted to mention it later, but okay. Today there will be a panel discussion with four speakers: Tomáš Papeš, Lubomír Ročka, Martin Hausschreck, and Igor Ekishev. Sorry, I'm so sorry. So there will be two parts with some break. Just grab some beers and also the pizza, which should arrive. And then there's the, at least 2 hours space for the networking. So don't leave after the talks, and just you can make some talk with us about not only about this topic. So that's it. I think that it's time for much interesting part. So I'd like to welcome our speakers. So guys, please take your seats. It's up to you. It's up to you. I will just move out a little bit. So, yeah, there is the microphone. We have only one today.
And yours?
And mine, of course. Well, okay, I can share it with you. Fine. Okay. So. Yeah, yeah. GPT, right? Okay. No. I think that we can start. Sorry. We can start with some architecture block, because the developers are almost the troubles with not only the migration, the application to the cloud, but maybe even with the developing part, not only the new application, but also with the current ones which they have to somehow migrate to the cloud. So maybe we can start with Tomáš, if I can. So Tomáš, what are the key benefits of serverless architecture, as pay per use and scalability, and how these benefits compare it to microservice and monolithic architecture?
Does it work? Yes, no? Okay. What are the key benefits? Like, first, I would say, let's define what is serverless, right? For someone, it might mean like Lambda is the only serverless. There is nothing else serverless. We can say that, in Google ecosystem where what? Too loud?
Continue. Sorry. I wanted to ask you to say something about you before you start, but you was so fast.
Yeah, okay. Svítí to?
So we can start one more time. Yeah.
Okay.
So Tomáš, please, can you please say something about you and what are you? Because today we have 4 speakers, and all of them are working in companies which are partners for the cloud providers, like the AWS, Google Cloud, and stuff like that. So maybe can you please introduce yourself?
Cool. Now it works. People were like, yeah, it works. Maybe my voice is just too loud, right? Then hi, I'm Tomáš. I'm the CTO of Vortex. We are Google partner. That means we are focusing on Google. Anyway, I worked with all the major clouds like Azure, AWS in my past. From the companies you might know, it's Kiwi, Spaceflow, ROI Hunter, stuff like this. And in the free time, I like, for example, free diving and these kind of activities, to let my steam off. And I will pass my mic.
Okay, thanks. So hi, my name is Martin. I'm working as a head of engineering at a company called Labyrinth Labs, and our main focus is basically to design and build cloud infrastructures for our clients. We mainly focus on startups and scale-ups, so we help them to either kickstart their journey or to help them solve some of their challenges that they already have in the cloud. And we have a lot of fun during the process.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Lubo. I work in Revolgy. We are cloud partners for more than 10 years, I believe. We support AWS and GCP mainly. We are strong in CE region, but also like we have customers all around Europe, and we are starting even looking for some customers in Asia or US. Yeah, we help different sizes of companies, startups as well, scale-ups. Also like SMB or enterprise, even in CE region, so we have few interesting companies. And we formerly came from Google Workspace, so helping like doing Google with Office stack, and then we are going to grow up to Google Cloud and then AWS Cloud. That's it. Yeah, we also have a lot of fun, quite agile company. Yeah, that would be all.
Yeah, thanks. Hi guys, I'm Igor from Apsatory. I'm a Google Cloud architect, so I work solely with Google Cloud. And in Apsatory as Apsatory, we are a premier partner in Workspace and Google Cloud. So basically, we help companies to work with Google Cloud. That's it.
So, okay, we're back to the first question. So, Toman, something about serverless architecture. So, are there any benefits of using it instead of, serverless and monolithic architectures?
Yes, of course. Like that depends on the use case you are looking at, right? And as I said in the beginning, like what is serverless? Is Lambda the only serverless? Are we talking like serverless containers, which is like Google's approach with Cloud Run? Or would you consider something like GK Autopilot, which is kind of serverless, right? You don't manage the nodes. Then some might consider this serverless as well. Then it really depends what you see as a serverless. And yes, I like the approach in general. For me, is that there is less operations with managing the underlying infrastructure, but still it's not the community. You still need the DevOps people or platform people, or what's the buzzword these days, to create the right developer experience, no matter what. If it's serverless, if it's Kubernetes or your on-prem, then on this level, it's still the same. It's more about the operational people and the speed of delivery and the less operations on the running side of things. And I love serverless, as Martin said, for digital native startups, companies which are like starting with cloud, because it's super fast, all right? You just build your container and you just deploy it to something what's called serverless in Google Cloud Run. In AWS, you can say what's the best service, like functions with backend as Docker image, right? Then it's super easy to start. And if you are pivoting your MVP, then bam, deploy it, develop fast, and then you will see if you need scale, you need power, you need more CPU, you need this or that, you will see based on the demand from the customers. You might throw everything, to the trash in like half a year or a year. It's not that big of a pain because it was just small fraction of the cost. What would you pay, setting up the whole cluster and everything around it? Martin?
Yeah, I mostly agree. So for us, serverless was and is especially useful when we have customers that have like peak loads in their applications. So we have a few of them that handle like a very peak load during, I don't know, every 2 weeks or so, and serverless proved to be very useful for that because you can scale very easily and it can be a lot more cost effective this way than running a Kubernetes cluster with all of the supporting services. So for us, I think the biggest benefit of serverless for our customers was this, to handle peak workloads. And I agree that you still have to have a DevOps team, you still have to have the people like handling infrastructure because you still have some infrastructure to manage, you still have to have some databases, you still have to have some, I don't know, VPCs or something that you need to manage. So you cannot offload all of it on serverless. And with serverless, I think that you as well have less operational work on the infrastructure, but you offload some of it to developers. Like they have more to take care of and they have to take like different approaches into mind.
Okay, so this means that, okay, if you have only the serverless application, but what about the combination, like the serverless and also with the monolithic and the microservice architecture? So is it also useful?
I think it can be, like it has to have a good use case because when for us, we usually focus on Kubernetes. That's our typical case, and we often have customers that also come up with part of the application running in Lambdas, for example. And we often try to discourage them to do this because you are introducing something new to the stack, and overall it might not be the best solution just because you are creating a snowflake. Basically, you have this one Lambda function that you need to take care of. It has different CI/CD, it has different monitoring, so We often discourage our customers to use serverless without like thinking about it. But if it has a valid use case, and we also had those, we can combine these two. Because, for example, we had companies that wanted to support both of the solutions. They wanted to have like better resilience, better reliability in the solution. So we also needed to combine those two, and I think it's possible. Like, it's a challenge. You also have to not only think about the infrastructure and how you combine it at that level, but you also need to like think about CI/CD, think about the code base, infrastructure as code base. How do you keep it in a way that is maintainable, that you are able to work with it in a sustainable way? So yeah, I think it has a valid use case.
So, Lubomir. Yeah.
If I may comment on this a bit, and we so far discussed mostly the computational serverless. I believe even services like S3 or Google Cloud Storage and PubSub or SQS are also serverless. So basically, they provide a different kind of service, but I believe that it's quite hard to build something just on Lambdas. You also need some kind of messaging and persistence. And in that sense, these services might be nice additions to, for example, Kubernetes, because it helps you offload some of the things. Especially running any persistence on Kubernetes has some complications. So especially combination with the high availability, for example, if you would like to have a database there, then to have it like on decent availability, you probably need it running on the 2 zones, which at the beginning is fine, but if your system grows and you have more and more customers, more and more transactions, then it really like the inter-zone connectivity costs really skies, like create half the price of the compute, which is quite a lot. So then having it serverless makes the persistence part makes it much simpler for you. And I also mention one thing regarding like using in the architecture, especially for those designs that no, maybe put it differently. If you really like build an application that is serverless native and really use those services a lot, it's probably you cannot migrate to any other solution. Basically, you have to build it again. So you really have to be sure if you decide to build something big, like for those testing cases that were mentioned there. That's really a super nice idea. Build it quick, test it. But if you see that as a viable option, I recommend to maybe migrate to Kubernetes. And that's nice on cloud. Then the migration from Cloud Run to Kubernetes is simpler than from Lambda, because then you have the ability to, for example, move from AWS to GCP, or maybe have, because of some compliance requirements, you could have part locally again in given nation, etc. So these are things to consider considering serverless in the architecture.
Yeah, I might have one thing too. That's why I said like, what is serverless, right? And you said that serverless for you it's like MVPs and so on. That's why I would little disagree. That's why I like the serverless containers and let's call it the Google approach. Because if you have the container, you can run it everywhere, right? You can run it in the Cloud Run, you can run it in the Lambda, and then if you reach some scale or some limit in resources or whatever, then you can think about like Kubernetes and these heavy operational things. But there is like so many use cases where it does not make sense to go Kubernetes, right? Because the kind of a workload you have. And that's why I love the like really like Docker or image-based serverless, not that much of AWS Lambdas and this kind of stuff, which is complete vendor lock. With like Docker images as a serverless deployed wherever Cloud Run, you can go and deploy it to Azure tomorrow, and you're done.
Yeah, almost. But I saw like companies that really build, and we have such customers that are like, quite successful, but we have others which kind of struggle with it, is that they really like use all those, not just the containers, but Lambdas, SQS, all the serverless stuff that is on AWS, which is like, you could then really like start quickly, deliver results super quickly, but then you basically are stuck there. So yeah, would you like to add something?
I don't know. Yeah, this conversation spreads like a little bit. We were talking about benefits. Yeah, I agree with Tomáš. benefit is the fast speed of development, and I can agree that we can extend our monolith applications with some serverless functions, so we can basically extend our applications, not extending our monoliths, but adding parts of serverless small functions. We can call these functions via some, I don't know, event or messaging systems, and do not overload our monolith applications.
So, Igor, maybe are there any cases where even the monolithic architecture makes sense? I mean, creating the application in the monolithic architecture.
Yeah, I think, for example, if you develop MVP product or POC, yeah, MVP. Let's take MVP. You want to make it fast. You just want to prove the premise that the product will be really viable. So you don't want to spend a lot of time designing properly architecture, and because microservices. Let's talk about microservices and then serverless. When we design microservices, we want to isolate components really like properly. That's the first thing. And the second thing, we should design API of each microservice. We should define it so we have no problems in the future. And we don't want to spend time when doing this when we are developing MVP and also POC. But when we are talking about POC, this could be a little project, and this, of course, this could be done with some functions. This could be really like small programs, small applications, and basically this type of architecture, serverless, event-driven type of architecture, a lot of times is suitable for these kinds of little applications when you, I don't know, drop something in the cloud storage, trigger some function, do some process, and write something to the database. It can prove some concept, and why not? It's like the fastest way to prove something.
So, I just finished the first round. So I like to say that there's also Slido where we can ask your questions. So feel free to do that. Please also do it if you are in person right here, because I will just read it and make it not only at the end of the presentation, but also during the panel discussion. So feel free to ask it.
Okay, Rega, little back to the monolith and microservices or like serverless, right? If we look at it from developers' perspective, not from just our like infra perspective, how to start? What is the best approach I like the most? Is okay. Usually the company have the monolith, right? And then they want to see and test the new serverless thingy. Then what you do, you put something like API gateway in front of your application, let's say, and then behind it you can have your classic monolith, and then some API endpoints will go to your serverless, right? And this is the easiest way how to combine those two worlds. And for example, if you want to break the monolith to microservices, you can do it this way because you are slicing the monolith by API endpoints or like logical pieces into smaller functions on the background, which can run in Cloud Run or whatever makes sense. Then this is the, like, you can always combine. And this is what I like the most, like give the developer the option. If you wanna, like deploy something small and fast and not that hungry on resources, do Cloud Run. If you have something huge, do Kubernetes. I agree there.
Yeah, I agree with Igor. I think that if you are just starting out and you are creating an MVP, you do not really care about any scale. You do not care about performance and those sort of things. So having a monolith is way easier because usually you also have people and developers that are like, most often you will find developers that did not work with serverless before. So for them, it would be way harder to build something from scratch in a serverless framework than to do it like the standard way. And like you don't really care where you deploy it. Like you can deploy it in Cloud Run, ECS, Kubernetes, whatever. Like it doesn't matter because at the end you'll probably like redo it at some point. Like you will not keep the current state. So I agree with you that I think a lot of companies are starting with monoliths because it's way easier and like they can get to the MVP way faster than doing it properly at the start.
Maybe I'll add something. Yeah, I want just to add the bad experience from my the bad case from my experience. When you don't have like good level of knowledge and skill how to properly design, how to properly isolate these microservices, you can end up with the situation when you need to make some kind of distributed transaction or eventual consistency. When you, for example, I made a microservices that really the API service, one service. I have an API service and backend service, and this API service at the same time did like the transaction to database and did transaction like emitting event to event system. So we wanted to have this like a single transaction, but it could be like really pain to make it. You know, then you start to think to over engineering or coming up with some kind of distributed transaction which you don't really want to do. Or you do eventual consistency type of handling this sort of thing. So you should really properly design this thing.
So, Lubomir, when there is the moment when the monolithic is not enough, and I have to migrate or change the architecture. So, what are the benefits or key factors for choosing the serverless or the microservice architecture?
Yeah, then it really depends. Like we already discussed those parts that are like good candidates to be moving first, and especially if the monolith is big or huge, even then you probably cannot move it at once. Especially if it is like super big one server, then running it on cloud probably just destroy your build because it will be super expensive. It cannot scale, so the way how you solved the performance before is just buy bigger server, and that's not the case in cloud in general. So what you can also mention is something that I used to call data integration hub. So basically, you create some kind of API, and for example, through either the event sourcing that might solve that case with like committing to transactions to database and event to the queue at the same time, or like the CQRS, like the command query segregation, makes sense. So in those like data integration hub, you have the data available from those backends, and also considers writing. So this basically creates something like a modern adapter that is typically living in the cloud as the first thing, and this gives you the ability to just then like take few functions that seems like a good candidate that need to be redoed are loosely coupled from the rest of the processes that are in that huge monolith, and then use them, for example, as a serverless, or just a microservice, because there is like we mixing these two up, but like having a microservice architecture is like I believe purely connected to the like software design. However, serverless is definitely more infrastructure, and you could have serverless, or you could have Kubernetes, or you could have even small VMs that you could through auto-scaling groups scale pretty easily, and sometimes it's better for you from some point of view. For example, we have a customer just now, and we're discussing if, and he's on Heroku now, and he's in the situation that he has lots of services on Heroku, but there's like these thoughts on internet, maybe Heroku isn't the best place anymore to serving some containers, and he's looking for like new place where to run. And he was considering Fly.io, but then we get in touch with him and designing something to use from the developer point of view, because Cloud Run is super nice. However, it is really, even from the Google point of view, there is not that nice connection to the rest of the, let's say, the VPC world in the cloud, because the connection isn't like super fluent. And this is same for actually for Lambdas. Those we use those that you could host a container directly on a VM that actually like smooth the situation. It's directly in the VPC, like the rest of the managed databases, etc. that are using. So the integration is easier for them, and that actually like helps them to move from one serverless to another. But you know, it's a complex process to move from one to the other. If you were just containers, Kubernetes, then the migration would be much simpler.
Yeah, so I probably agree. I think that you can still have monolithic applications that can run in cloud, and like if it is a monolithic architecture, it doesn't mean that it cannot scale and like it cannot run in Kubernetes. I think it's still possible to do that. But if you have a very like legacy application, very big with a lot of business logic that is resource heavy, you will eventually run into probably like problems with scaling. And problems with scaling usually mean high cost. Like you can scale vertically in cloud very easily, but like it will cost you a ton of money. So you will probably want to optimize the way you scale, and you will want to like break down the monolith into smaller pieces so you can scale them more easily, and you can scale them based on different metrics, because like most often when you have a monolithic architecture, you are not utilizing all of its like features at like the same way. So you will be, if you break it, you will be able to scale individual parts of it more efficiently. And that way you can also probably ensure like better availability of the system and like overall reduce the costs.
Yeah, this reminds me the times like 5-7 years ago when everyone was like, hey, monolith is bad, like let's migrate to microservices, and all the benefits we got was network latency. That's it. Anything else worked the same. Then, you know, monolith is not always the bad guy.
But when we speak about the monolith, so we just started with the parts about the scaling. So what about to compare these, scaling options for all these three types of the architectures? Yeah, because the thing is, for example, with the serverless, maybe it's a little bit worse for you to scale it up because you are not having these metrics. I mean, for the scaling, and also sometimes it's a little bit harder to find how to scale it up. So what do you think about it?
I think we can group monolith and microservices together at this point. Like if it is containers in Kubernetes, you scale them basically the same way. You can use different metrics for it, but like the principle is the same in my opinion. So with these type of, let's say, container workloads, you can either scale by some basic metrics like CPU and memory. That's the most basic thing that you can do. Or even better, if you are able to utilize some like either business level metrics, like number of transactions that you are processing, number of payments, number of players in the game, something like that. You can scale based on that. Or like if you can scale by number of messages in the queue, for example. If you have these kind of metrics, you are able to scale the containers workload more efficiently. With serverless, you do not really care about that at all, basically, with lambdas and stuff like that. So with serverless, I think that you still need to care about scaling, because I mentioned that we had a customer with very peak workloads, and even serverless cannot scale like instantly. Like it still takes, sometimes you still have cold starts with lambdas. So when you have 500,000 people reaching your site within 1 minute, you still have to take some precautions, and you still have to do something about it. So there are mechanisms for, like, we call it pre-scaling the infrastructure even in this way, but it's like with serverless, I think that it offloads a lot of the operational work from you to the vendor or like to the platform.
Yeah, it's just about the scaling the application, but sometimes you also need to scale the database, for example. And then there's some issues with and you have only for example, Kubernetes. How are you going to scale the database? Are you running also the database in the cloud? I mean, not like the SaaS solution, or are you even running the database in the Kubernetes and you can scale it up? I mean, we are speak about the relational databases, right? So.
Yeah, we I think vast majority of the cases use managed services for databases. We find it like way more reliable. We sometimes have the case that we run it differently, mostly because of the costs, because like managed solutions like this can cost you a lot of money. So, but like overall, we use mostly these solutions, and there are different approaches to this. Like you can either use a serverless offering with these solutions where you are priced by some units and you do not really care about the scaling. But again, it can be more costly for you. Or you can, like with services like Aurora in AWS, you can scale it either vertically where you have a lot of options, or you can like scale it horizontally. You can add reader replicas. It's still an option to do that. So we even have cases where we, like most of these solutions, if you do not use a serverless offering and you still have like instances in the managed services, they do not scale automatically, even if they are managed services. But you can also implement some simple logic to scale it yourself. Like if you know that you have an event, like you are a streaming service and you know there's a football match at, I don't know, 8 p.m., you can have a simple script that will like change the number of instances in the database or like change the size of them. So that's something which we often implement. Or like if you have a predictable workload, you can automate this and scale it yourself.
So Lubomir, you works with both clouds. I mean Azure and GCP. Oh, sorry, AWS and
Yeah, sure.
GCP. So, are there any difference between the approach of with issues like cold start of the serverless functions?
Yeah, I believe they are like both. Lambda has that, Cloud Run has that, Functions has that. Function version 2 are basically Cloud Run with just a different approach. Yeah, there are some optimizations. One of our customers, for example, was serving it basically keeping few of the instances running constantly, so not turning them off, which is nice unless you have a memory leak, which they did. So after a few days, the service just died. So they have to anyway restart it at least once a day. Yeah, so they are things like these. If you cannot anticipate, then of course, like the cold start is an issue. You could have those few instances in advance, but yeah, that's probably the only thing you could do. You could also try to like offload to some like queues, right, to help you keep the because the queue is faster, I believe, like in those like just storing a message there. So even like using queues in offloading database sometimes might help to use these like storing in the queues and then commit those changes to databases when the time there is, like there's time, like slowly. So in that case, and then eventually streams the events back. So if the application is able to sustain this kind of design pattern, then it would help you to scale as well. However, this like certain, like the relation databases has a cap on its own. So for example, if you wrongly design the schema, there's quite a lot of logs because there's a lot of writes and in the same time lots of reads from the same table, then basically, no hardware, no architecture cannot save you. It's just super slow. So it also starts with the designing of the application the right way. And then, of course, the read replicas are the standard approach. But again, the application has to know that, for example, this endpoint is just for reading, no writing, etc. And yeah, even like those more cloud-native RDS, like the Aurora and the AlloyDB, are both on based on Postgres. They are fine. They are more performant, but again, this is not like a silver bullet. It's not like 100 times performant because it's still a relation schema which has its limits. So yeah, these are like the things to consider.
So Igor, you said that there are some cases for the monolith architecture. So when I wanted to scale it up, I mean for the loads. So are there any good options how to do that, or should I have to migrate it to another architectures?
Yeah, of course, as always, it depends. But for example, if you have like a stateless application, if you don't store nothing in the application, you can easily use horizontal scaling. You can easily spin up new instances and just put load balancer in front of them, and you will be fine. So that's the one thing you should consider. And of course, you can scale horizontally. you can just in Google Cloud, in every cloud, you can basically just add resources, and it will work.
Yeah, I have just two things to add. First, like if your application sucks, no cloud will save you. It will just destroy your wallet. And that's also, we are talking about like, serverless and Kubernetes and scaling up, that in the end of the day means throwing more money to the cloud providers. Then we need to also think about like the bottom limit, not just like how to scale, but where is the limit when I don't want to scale? Because there are use cases where you just don't want. The one example is, I don't know, I have an application which is relying on my third party, right? I put everything to my PubSub queue, and on the other hand, I have Lambda. Lambda scales kind of quickly. And now I have in the queue like 10 millions of requests, 10 millions of things to process. Lambda goes and spends a lot of instances, and then my third-party API, on the other hand, will just die. It's amazing that it scaled, but why, right? Think about it from this point of view too.
Yeah, and that was basically my comment as well, because in most cases, DOM already is great. For example, all the batch processing stuff. So you don't have to care about like super that you have loosely coupledness and you could scale different parts differently because you just want to calculate it in some time, and so you just have again more or less manage things. How you could just send the workload there, and it would eventually ends and gives you the answer. And that's also like the case for monolith.
You already said what I wanted to say, so.
Not always you need to scale.
So right now it's the time for questions. So I will just read it some on the Slido. So I can check it up, or I will also read it. So how do you structure engineering teams around the serverless functions? Usually the microservice maps to a single two-pizza team. The functions are much smaller.
Yeah, I would say if I may start. So it really depends on the domain. Like if regarding functions, still I believe they are somehow connected. So like although the whole application which is built on microservices supported by serverless, still I believe that you could separate it on bigger chunks. Even for example, like simple things regarding billing, right? There will be function for issuing an invoice, function for actually booking that invoice, function that will like send an invoice to the email service, right? And all of these simple functions should be managed by one team because they are really like on the business level related together. So technology is not always the answer. Also like the business, because I believe they will communicate with just one business partner or subject matter expert on the other side. So having them collocate makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, if you have small functions, it doesn't mean that you do not group them. Like, you still group them into different APIs. So the approach is not that different from having microservices. You still group them by business logic, by the domain. So I think it's pretty similar. I agree with what you said.
So we have a question for Tomáš. If building serverless infrastructure on a greenfield, which of the cloud provider would you recommend it, and why the GCP?
Okay, so some of the friends in the audience having fun. Basically, what I would recommend, like, depends. In the end of the day, yes, I like GCP the most because for me it's easiest, and if you want to deploy application quickly, it's easy. It does not have 240 services as AWS have. That's one of the strengths of GCP. Then, like with Cloud Run, you just go, you run 1-2 commands, you have it deployed, you have some API somewhere you can start testing, developing, right? That's why I would go GCP. Anyway, if your team is familiar with Azure, go Azure. Does not make sense to go and spend 2 months learning GCP, or a month or a week. Just go with what you know, and then at some point you can evaluate. But if you are like super new startup, go with what you know.
Yeah, totally agree. That's definitely if you have some experiences, any technology that is like suitable for that cloud or the other, like even for Azure, I believe like a lots of companies like tend to grow with Microsoft, so they are like very Microsoft oriented, then Azure is your choice. The same for, but Google, from my experience, is the simplest one, easiest one. With one exception, I believe that's the API gateway, which is a very nice service in AWS. So if you are API heavy, then I believe AWS is the choice. Yeah, so anyone would add like that?
I think it doesn't really matter. Like I think you can do all the same things in all of the clouds. Often it's a business decision more than a technical one. Like somebody gives you $100,000 in credits and you chose the right cloud. So often it's a business decision, in my opinion, more than a technical one.
Yeah, you touched the right point. This is so funny with startups, right? Usually where they go, whoever gives them this 100K, every cloud gives them the 100K. Every single one. It's 100, 150. If you are AI first, you get 250 on Google. You know, that's amazing. And then the startups are jumping, right? They deplete in a year those 100K in AWS, then they, okay, bye-bye AWS, they go Azure. Then by end of the day, it's fun to meet these startups after 3 years. Once they depleted all the credits, and then the real fun starts. What is the best cloud for me? Because at that point, usually they have the team, they have the knowledge, they have the market, they know what they are doing, and then we can start talking the real business.
I believe the right cloud for them is the last one, because I believe that the app only grows. And the thing is, if you build it on Lambdas, then moving on Cloud Run is really pain. So that's where the containers make sense. And there is like, serverless, like those AKS on, I forget the name, because there is like 400 different kind of names for services in AWS. But there is a serverless option for Kubernetes as well there. So Fargate, thanks. So that's the if you plan to do this like funding traveling or credits traveling, then Kubernetes is the answer for sure.
Okay, so I will just ask one last question from the Slido at this moment. So using containers first approach, what about secret ingress and zero trust?
You know what? Like when you use container, like when you use Cloud Run, this is a serverless platform, and you still use containers. And what about secret ingress and zero trust? I'll start from zero trust. You can easily implement it, zero trust approach, using Cloud Run and functions or whatever serverless, because it doesn't contradict, these two concepts doesn't contradict themselves at all. So zero trust is just about you verify connection at each point of at every like single communication point. And in Google Cloud, what I do, I use a service named IAP, Identity Access Proxy. Identity Aware Proxy, exactly. So basically, you turn it on for all your services for that run on Cloud Run, just by click, let's say, and that's it. And all your services are closed. Then you add principals. You can add service accounts, you can add groups, users, and domains, and to open the connection to the service. And each request to these services verified, and JBT token is should be in this request to access the service.
So maybe I would add that like having a stateless containers short-living one is pretty good security approach. Of course, like is not solve everything, but even if the attacker get access to 3 seconds living container, then he probably didn't achieve much, right? And then the container is discarded, and the new one, ideally from like secured container registry, is load again. So that's one of the like nice approach or nice feature that is basically given for free on the Kubernetes. And then I believe like in general, clouds are rather more secure than less, especially if you not like really screw up the configuration. So yeah, I wouldn't be afraid of security of like container first approach.
Yeah, I will connect a little bit to the serverless and zero trust. You can use the identity aware proxy, and I believe guys at Ruby make Cloud Run work also with the Cloudflare zero trust. Then you can integrate whatever you want. On secrets, on Cloud Run, you have integration with Secret Manager, right? Which is your managed secret provider. You have all the history, all the accesses, everything fully managed. You don't need to do anything, easily integrated. And on Ingress, you touched on it. You can go with the default URL, or you can use API gateway, or you can use APG, whatever suits you to your use case, basically. API gateway in Google is not that great as AWS, I agree. That's why we have the APG or some other offerings. Depends how you deploy them. I would not be afraid of this approach, and maybe you want to add how this is handled on AWS, because you're the expert there.
I mean, I don't think that it does really matter what you use. Like, you can achieve all of these things with all of the technologies that we discussed. I'm sure that all of the cloud vendors have their own secrets manager and their way of loading secrets into whatever like platform that they use, either EKS, ECS, or the Cloud Run, or whatever Google uses. Ingress is the same, and I think that like Zero Trust is pretty similar. So I don't think it really matters if you use cloud first, container first approach, or serverless, or like any of the orchestrator platforms within any of the clouds. You can handle all of these challenges in every one of them.
So thank you. We'll move somewhere. So don't read these questions. You can ask them at the part of the networking. You can reach your favorites and ask them about it. So I like to move to the migration phase. So I have the running application. I run it on premise. I wanted to migrate it to the cloud. Yeah. There are some strategies. I think that I like the newest one, I think, by AWS. It's some 7 hours. It's called like that. So maybe we can start a discussion about what is the best of it.
What is the best strategy?
Yeah, what is the best strategy, and when you can, how you choose the correct one for you. I mean, for your application. So.
Well, I think that it has to start with a discussion. Like, why do you want to migrate to the cloud? I think that would be the first question. Like, when we start a discussion with a potential new client, we always like ask them a lot of technical questions, but the most important ones are like, what are your pain points? What are you trying to solve? Do you have issues with outages? Do you have issues with performance or cost or scaling or whatever? And like, these are the answers that will determine, I think, the correct approach that you want to choose. So first of all, I think you need to figure out like what you are trying to solve, because that's the most important thing. It can be that you want to have a better developer experience for your team. That's also a valid question. Like cloud can potentially give them a better leverage on what tools can they use and how quickly they can develop. But I think that you at first need to figure out like what is the motivation of doing that. And based on that, you can choose the right technology. And you also have to take into an account like at what stage the company is and at what stage the product is. So if you have somebody that does not have anything and it's a greenfield project, you can guide them on how to, like what technology to choose. And like for that, it could be a monolithic MVP, or like if we already have some requirements that they need to reach a certain scale, or they need certain technologies, we can help them to identify the correct technology to use in the cloud. But I think that you still have to start with figuring out what's the motivation and then what's the state of the application. So if they have something that I don't know, they are running on premise and it has a certain amount of users, you can based on the operational like workload that they have and based on their experience with operating the current state, you can then choose the target platform. And it can be usually when you have something running already, you wouldn't move it to serverless because like that would mean that you would have to rewrite the application if you would want to do it properly. So most of the time we want to look at the current state and figure out like a modernization plan, basically, like to eliminate some of the challenges that the application might have, and that would prevent it from, for example, scaling or to be, let's say, cloud native or like ready for cloud migration.
There's one more aspect to this, and that's time. Sometimes the customers really want to make it quickly, and then basically the only thing there is lift and shift. But also try to like be a good advisor and discuss them that sometimes it's definitely not the best approach, and try to get some more time might help. And yeah, definitely the motivation and understand like what is the requirement there. For example, if they would like to scale globally, then like if they want to have more regions, but what are the benefits and what are the cons, because there are like huge cons going multi-regional deployments. And yeah, so there is like the longer discussion is, if it is like fruitful and makes sense, then the better for the migration. And then the other advice, like don't hurry it up if you have that luxury of time, and build a solid landing zone, solid services that are there for, and then slowly migrate the teams, taking care about their part of the business, already building on the top of those landing zone. Because if you just do it in a rush and move directly with the chaos, then it will be much harder to like solve it later. But if you create good governance on the good landing zone, then I believe half of the tasks is already delivered.
I don't know. You should always, as always, just consider your budget, your skill level of the team, if it makes sense to do something more than lift and shift. But basically, in the end, you want to do something more than lift and shift. You want to use, if you're on the cloud, you want to use cloud benefits, and you will end up refactoring your architecture, moving your parts of your application to serverless functions, and using things like PubSub, I don't know, and basically cloud, offers a lot of functionality. I don't know.
Cool. I would add a few more things, as I was part of the migration of Kiwi, that one of the critical parts is exactly as you said, the landing zone, have it ready, have the tooling for the developers. But one of the things where we failed a lot was to explain the developers why and train them. Because at many big companies you will see like huge pushback, like why the hell are we migrating, because like it works right on my machine, and the bare metals are cheaper and these kind of things. You need to work with the teams internally a lot and explain them and train them and show them the benefit of the cloud, and make them like believe that what they do is for the good, and understand how cloud operates, because it's completely different from the on-premise. They need to learn new tools, they need to learn new tricks. Many like old school operational guys will say, hey, but you are taking my work away. No, I'm giving you more, you don't know yet. Then this is one aspect. And second is, sometimes it's not just about the technology, we touched on it, it's about the business, right? It's which of the cloud providers will be better partner for me? Which of them will help me to, for example, onboard to the marketplace and sell more, right? Which will help me to scale my business, which will give me some, let's call it, nice incentives, which have better partners, which can help me to migrate and make it easy. It's not just about the technologies, a lot about the discussion on the business side of the things.
Yeah, I agree. Like, you have to discuss these things with the development teams and with the teams within the company, because at the end, like, those will be the people using the solution that you provide for them. So you always want to listen to them, and you always want to like take into consideration also their preference. For example, like as part of our migrations or like cloud, we call it the onboarding of the applications to the cloud, we also build observability stacks, for example. And like there's lots of tooling for monitoring and logging and everything. So there's a, let's say, the technical process of choosing the right tooling. Like you have Loki can be a good tool, good logging tool for some use cases, and Elasticsearch can be a good tool for others. But you also take into an account like user preference and like what do people are used to work with, because like they will be the ones using it. And that's the same way with CI/CD. Like if they are used to GitHub Actions, you don't want to move them to Jenkins or whatever. So discussing the process and the benefits and the target state with the development teams, I think, is crucial within the process.
Sure, sure, sure. I think it's time for a break. And then after the break, we will focus on the strategy itself. So we will discuss it. Oh. Okay. I think that, yeah, I think it's the time for a quick break. So we will have 10 minutes break and then we will continue. So just keep some food and drinks and we will see it later. So, thanks.
Thanks.
Hello.
Okay. So we'll start the second part. I think we can start with the question on the Slido because it's quite good as we wanted to speak about the migration phase. So if there is a solution which is not idle, of course, do you think it's better to fix the current one or to build it from the scratch and then migrate it? So what do you think, guys?
Yeah, I work for a company who actually wants to build a platform, business platform, so where customers and consumers will meet to do some transactions. And they kind of aware of the producer of the service as well, so they want to build it on their, like, just connect their services that they have to create that kind of platform. But actually they tried 3 times. It took 3 years and they never get nowhere. So yeah, especially, so my advice is if you are going to would like to create something with like added value that is like different than what you currently have, is sometimes better to start separately, ideally on the serverless or like the cloud native way, because that things you will fail fast, fail cheap, you will scale quickly. So that's the ideal thing, to like test these things and then migrate the older workloads there to fit the new fresh thing. That's my experience.
If I may add a little bit of context, I know where this question is from. And imagine a situation where you have a cloud infrastructure, right? And you have, let's call it 50% of it in Terraform, infrastructure as a code, or whatever tool you choose. And then you look at it and you know it's a piece of crap, right? It sucks. Would you finish the another like 40, 30% into this crap and then fix it slowly, or throw all the work away and start from scratch? And imagine that you spent on it like, I don't know, like 2-3 months on this like 50-60%, which sucks. Because it did some junior did it or whatever, does not matter. It's just not great. What would you do?
I would consider if this rewriting, if this throwing the work to the trash and starting from scratch will actually add some value to the company. You want to just program and engineer it for the sake of program and engineer. You want to think if it will add some value. You're right. You asking which the solution is not ideal, but I guess the ideal solution, you won't came up with the ideal solution either way. If you think like this, you have that you have to rebuild the whole thing. Maybe try to do this in small steps, not really throwing away the whole thing and start from scratch.
I think it also depends on the context. Like, are we talking about infrastructure or are we talking about like application logic? Because like that changes the decision, I think. And also it depends on the perspective, like who is doing this part of work. Like if it is us as a company building infrastructures, for us it's way easier to build something from scratch because we have done it countless amount of times, and like for us it's way easier to build something new and migrate the applications there than to come to a stack that was not built by us and we do not know the ins and outs of it, because I believe that you learn by operating the platform or the infrastructure. So if we build these solutions that are a little bit opinionated by us, I think for us it's way easier to build something like that, move the application there and discard the rest. And if it is like an application that we are talking about, if it is like a core functionality that you have, I think it depends on the use case. Like what is the amount of effort that you would have to put in, and what is the problem that the not ideal state is causing. So I think it has to have a discussion.
Yeah, on the application side, I agree. On the infrastructure side, you said that you have your set of tools, right? Imagine that my company have this different set of tools and his company have different set of tools. And now the customer is jumping from my company to your company or the other way, whatever. Would we will always force the customer to change the stack to what we know how to operate?
I think this depends. Like, if your need is to get a functional solution quickly, like if you need it fast and we can do it for you within a month or so, and it would take you half a year, and you are willing to make some changes in the tooling that you are using, or like get to know something new, I think it might be a good business decision for you to do it this way. So I believe it is a valid case. It is not suited for every customer. That's something that I definitely agree with. But for a lot of them, it's way easier and it makes way more sense business-wise to do it this way, to discard something that you have, build something new quickly, even by another company, and like do it within a month instead of spending half a year on building something your way and like learning by on the way. So
Yeah, and imagine that, you know, like my way, I know it. My people know how to operate the stuff in cloud, whatever it is, serverless Kubernetes practices. And if you do it your way, I agree you might do it faster, but how you will ensure the customer will, you know, learn your way quickly and be able to operate it like day two, not just the day one.
but I don't think our ways have to be different. You know, like if you are using Kubernetes and we have a Kubernetes setup that solves your issues, you do not have to learn everything. Like usually it doesn't make sense to force a customer to change all of the tooling to something that they do not know. But if they already use Kubernetes or they had a plan to move to Kubernetes or like containers workload, and they use Grafana on their own way, they have their own issues with it, and we have a working solution, I think it's a good fit. Like you will use this mostly the same tooling, you will get a better stack, and you can like have a setup that works for you for many years. So.
So maybe we can speak about a different situation. So I have the application. It's you can call it legacy one. Yeah, it's running on the VM. I have some files which are running on the VM, and I wanted to migrate it. I'm forced to migrate to the cloud, yeah, by the managers. Yeah, it's a common situation, I think. And there is no simple way how can I integrate it, for example, the object storage. And I have to migrate it to the Kubernetes. So right now, I'm in a situation when I have to choose between the lift and shift, or remake the application, or maybe just start implementing from the greenfield. So what is your recommendation about it? I mean, in this situation, from the developer perspective.
So, but I have a recent experience, a company migrating to the cloud because they want to scale up. They get a nice deal from the US customer, and they were moving from some data center to cloud. They choose AWS, and they also they have a huge amount of files. However, they use a proprietary software that requires a POSIX system. And the way out for them was to use Fuse on GCP or Goofies, which is faster than Fuse on AWS. So they choose Goofies on AWS, and then they were able to putting the app, basically package it to the container, run it in on the Kubernetes EKS, basically scaling it nicely, and then use that sidecar, the Fuse driver, to access object storage, which is because if you had just the file store or EFS on those clouds, then it would cost a fortune, so it would definitely destroy the case. But by this, they were basically able to overcome. But I believe there are different situations, different cases when other solutions might be better. So it definitely case by case. So there's no golden rule, I believe.
I think if you are moving to the cloud, your end goal, I think, should be to modernize the application, because if you are just lift and shifting all of what you have on premises to the cloud, you will not gain a lot of benefits, and it will cost you more money to run it in cloud. So even if you have a business requirement to move to the cloud, as you said, like you have a manager that forces you to do that, and I guess that can happen. At the end, I think you, as a team, as a let's say platform engineering team or like DevOps team, or call it whatever you want, your end goal should be to modernize and to introduce some of the new tooling, because that will enable you to like use the benefits of the cloud, the elasticity, the flexibility, and all of those things that are available to you there.
Yeah, I like what you mentioned. Like, if you look to the recent studies, like 80% of CIO realized that the moving to the cloud brought them nothing, and now they are modernizing and like making the applications cloud native, right? But I would at one point disagree with all of you, because depends what the application is and how much money is bringing to me, right? If I need this application to the cloud, let's say, because I need to run US region, then if I will just take it to the cloud, make it run there, whatever it is, in the same setup where it is, throw some money on it to let it work, and this application will bring me $10 billion in revenue, I don't really care if it's like Kubernetes, cloud native, whatever, sorry.
Yeah, but the same way you could move it to a data center in the US, like you can replicate the setup the same way you have it in Europe. So I agree that this is a valid point. Like if it makes sense business-wise, and like you do not care like how much money it costs because it still gives you profit, I think that's true. But like maybe you don't have to use AWS or Google during the process. You can use some local provider or something like that.
Yeah, but he said the business decision is go to cloud anyway, right? Then I'm considering that they need to move to cloud. Then if the application will bring me like shitload of revenue day one, then I would just lift and shift it, don't care that much. And then, as some of you said, like day two operations, let's think what is costing us the most, and replatform it, whatever. That's the FinOps. We can go, hours and hours on this.
I'll just add one more thing, and from a perspective of a person working in a company that builds these infrastructures for customers, I think that often it is good to challenge them. Like, why do you want to move to the cloud? Because at the end, we often come across a customer that just wants to move to the cloud because he believes that it will solve all of the issues. And like you could do that. You could take all of the workload that they have on premises and move it to the cloud, but it will usually not solve the issues. So at the end, you will not have a happy customer. So often from a perspective of a company that does this for other companies, you have to challenge your customers and you have to really talk to them like, what is the motivation to do this? Because that affects the decision-making process that you do during the migration.
Yeah, I like completely agree with that. This is why I gave it the context. Like, I need to scale the US tomorrow to bring the revenue, right? If I want to just migrate, yes, there needs to be plan, there needs to be discussions.
Yeah, definitely, like having happy customers is the goal of all of us, I believe. So yeah, like having a discussion, manage the expectation what the cloud will bring and which won't, is definitely part of our work, I believe, and should be always. Just a few comments. Sometimes I met companies that have to move to the cloud because of the investors. So if you are not in the cloud, we cannot sell you on that money. So just move to the cloud. We don't care. We'll pay the bill for half a year, and then the new investors will take care about the super increased costs. Yeah. So that's kind of nasty scenario, but it happens. There is no like super good advice. Of course, try to do do some damage control. So try to, we call it internally like lift, tinker, shift. So try to tune what's possible there in the, let's say, half a year that you give for the migration, and that's it basically. Yeah.
I can try to make it a little bit harder. So imagine that you have you prepared the new stack, I mean the platform. Yeah, you migrated there almost all your application, and there are still some leftovers. And these leftovers are, for example, WordPress stuff. And the thing is that you prepare it, the new pipeline, which doesn't support the, CI/CD for old stack. Yeah, I mean, moving to the VMs and stuff like that. And these developers who manages the WordPress sites are using in better situation the Git pool, in worse even STP. And you wanted to make it your pipeline in some standard way. And right now you are in the phase that you have to find a way how you can make it or run it, this application also in the environment. I mean, probably serverless or Kubernetes. So how you will deal with that?
Okay, I will give the word to the guys. Honestly, I want to do smart guy. I don't do a lot of migrations in my career, so I would like to hear you guys what you will think about it.
Oh, go. Okay. Do you really need to migrate? Why not to stay like? Okay, I understand it's like old school stack, whatever you want to modernize it, but at some point, do you really want to migrate? Doesn't it make sense to stay hybrid? Like example, company migrated from AWS to GCP, but they have some like Lambda functions which migrate would be super expensive. That means they make it work and they stayed hybrid. And the same way, why not to stay hybrid with your own premise?
You don't want it to operate, two stacks. I mean, the CI/CD pipelines, you want to have only one, yeah? And it's, for example, if you are using, for example, Flux or Argo CD for the Kubernetes, you can't do that for the VMs, and you have to find a way how you can deal with that. So,
I think the situation that you describe is one of the most valid use cases for lift and shifting part of your infrastructure, because and this was a real case for us. Like we had a company that had a lot of services that we were able to modernize and move to Kubernetes, and then we have WordPress installations, and we tried running it in Kubernetes, and it was a huge pain in the ass, and we learned it the hard way. So for us, this would be a pretty valid case to just lift and shift the WordPress part to AWS in our case, and run it on EC2s, because we couldn't find a good way to run that particular use case of WordPress in Kubernetes, and it was unfeasible to do it that way. So this is a very valid use case to lift and shift something, I think, because I believe if you have 90% of the infrastructure modernized and running on Kubernetes in AWS, you do not want to keep those two servers on premises. You would rather move them to EC2, because that way you can manage access to the whole environment in a unified way. You can still unify a lot of it. You can still manage access the same way. I guess you can partially use the same CI/CD solution, not all the way, but partially at least. You can still use the same observability stack. You can use Grafana in a unified way. You can even scrape the metrics from Kubernetes to Prometheus from those instances. So in our case, it's a pretty valid use case if you have some legacy application that is not suitable to run in Kubernetes or in serverless, and you have a lot of those. WordPress is just one of them. Running it in some, let's say, tuned setup on EC2s is a pretty valid use case.
Then there's the other option, just to retire. That's one of the R's from the 7 R's. So I believe there are better ways how to host a simple web. Of course, the whole eShop's built on that, right? But if it's not the case and it's just a website where you store a few things, then consider or single page app on S3, right? So that might do as well.
You will be surprised how many things run on WordPress.
I know. Yeah, like the WooCommerce, right? Many eShops run like that. I know.
okay, I think that right now it's time for some questions, from the audience. So everyone always thinks that migration will be smooth and wonderful, of course, right? But what are the biggest fails you have ever seen, and what want to really watch out for?
Yes, I will start, and that's the management commitment. So if the migration is driven from below, not from there's no commitment of top management that would really want to migrate, then it will never succeed, because it will definitely never be smooth and wonderful. There will be lots of costs and lots of pain around the way. So without solid commitment from the management, you will get nowhere, definitely.
Yeah, I would add we are discussing mostly like compute, a little bit of storage, right? But the migration of compute is easy. You can migrate compute if you have it containerized easily, like left and right, from on-prem to whatever cloud, whatever you want to do. The pain in the ass, the real shit is with data. Moving data is painful. AWS offering you the Cloud SQL migrations to Postgres, to MySQL, the tools which should do it for you. The same GCP, but in many cases, this does not work. You need to work really hard to migrate the data. Then you have business critical applications. That means what happens when I migrate the data? Can I afford the downtimes? There is so many pain with data, not just the compute, just look into the data. And then we touched it a little bit, the operational stack, right? The monitoring, the logging, how you will do this in the cloud. But anyway, the biggest pain is the data and people.
Yeah, I think I agree. Like with migrations, I think you should have a solid plan in the beginning, like what is the target environment, and you should do a lot of testing. When we do bigger migrations, we like always do load testing of the solutions, because in the past it happened to us, like if you do not really test it at scale, it can act differently in the cloud because sometimes you're also, when you are using a managed database like RDS, for example, from the Aura offering, it is a slightly different database. Like it's not 100% compatible. So, or like with MongoDB and DocumentDB in AWS, it's the same case. Like you can have a solution that works out in depth very, very fine, but if you do not test it at scale, you can find some problems during the migration. So I think you should have a solid plan for the migration process. You should have a lot of testing beforehand, and you should also prepare some rollback procedures because you might need them during the process.
Yeah, you touched one sensitive topic as well, like one CPU in cloud is not one CPU in bare metal. Then exactly like load test your application and perf test them, because you might be surprised because like all this luxury of managed environment in cloud is taking some cost somewhere, and it's usually performance on your CPU and this kind of stuff. And on top of it, you pay for it, right? That Google AWS is managing it for you.
I agree. Like we also put a lot of effort into right sizing of the environment after you do the migration, because as you said, like the environment is not identical to what you had. So like the sizes can be different, and often you find out after the process how you should properly size the environment, because that's the point where you actually have the usage patterns show up and you have all of your users using the platform. So I think the migration process is fairly complex. Like it has a lot of stages, and it does not end at the point where you actually cut over the application, but it also has a lot of work after that. Like you still need to monitor the solution, you need to right size it, you need to optimize it, and during most of the migrations, you will find some points to optimize the target solution.
Yeah, this reminded me as well one experience from the past of migration of database. We had a database on-premise and database in cloud. And like what I want to migrate seamlessly, zero downtime, everything amazing, right? Then at that point, we set it up the two-way synchronization of the data. Yeah, but what we didn't realize back then, it's like years ago, is that the traffic is freaking expensive. And this synchronization was running for like 2 or 3 weeks until we realized that, oh, fuck, the bill is now like tens of thousands of dollars for traffic. Yeah, then like watch out for the traffic out of the cloud. Whatever you give them, they will give you for free. Whenever you have two-way synchronization, they ask you a shitload of money.
So maybe we can step back about the big failures. Maybe we can combine it also with another question. And is it what are the worst apps that you helped to migrate? So just think about it. Not mention the company, just mention the solution.
believe sometimes the most complex one are those RPs and CRMs. Those biggest, like, especially when they want to modernize them. So, like, moving the old, already unsupported version of ERP running on an old unsupported version of database to the cloud is just not a solution, because there are no, if you not manage it yourself. So you have to somehow modernize it. So I move to more modern ERP, and some of the functions not implement within it, just customizing it, but either use better services for that, software as a service, other things. And this really takes years, I believe, especially to find the correct people who know the processes, how to model them in the different systems for the developers, because usually the ERP developers aren't the normal developers. They are used to work just with that and know the functions of SAP and other things. So yeah, that's for me, like, having this, because it's not just about the infrastructure, but it's also about the business logic that sometimes nobody knows. Yeah, I just push the button here and then the invoice appears on the other side. And then you find that, like, a programmer 10 years ago who left 10 years ago the company, write something somewhere, and you have to find it out and then rewrite and use some, like, other service, microservice that just communicate and create the PDF, send it to the printer, right? Or to the storage. And that's, I believe, like, if you have super big monolith with, like, several layers of logic, even in database, that you have to somehow unveil and modernize. That was, in my life, the worst case for migration to the cloud.
Yeah, I'm lucky that I never touched SAP migration. Then this was not my case, but what happened back in Kiwi, like, as the company was growing real fast, then we had there, like, hundreds of services, right? And a lot of team, and over the years there was a lot of, like, changes in the teams, responsibilities, blah, blah. And when we were migrating from the on-premise to cloud, one of the biggest pains was not the applications itself, right? Whatever it is, language, does not matter, it's still containers for, like, DevOps people. It was the dependencies. Because you migrated all the critical applications and whatever's left there is left there. And then you discover that, like your check-in process is not working. Why? Because of these microservices, we thought no one's using, right? Because we haven't had it properly monitored, because it was written 10 years ago by our CTO in whatever language, and it was just living there on the VM forever. No one knew about it. Then one of the biggest pains with migrations I really had was figuring out the dependencies.
Yeah, I think the worst systems are those which are customly made and often are using technologies that are overstretched for their use case, and WordPress is one of the examples. But the worst are, like, systems that were built by people that are no longer around in the company, like nobody has the information about them. So often when you work with something like that, you only get partial information of the problems or, like, of the nuances of the systems, and it often produces some problems for you.
Yeah, and at this point we are all happy that the applications we are migrating are monolith. All these hundreds of microservices, that's pain.
So are there any other issues with the migration? I mean, for example, you have never, okay. You have again a legacy application. It has some storage, object storage, where there is some regulation. I mean, especially US and European Union based. So how can I handle it with the cloud? Is the cloud something which can help with me? And should it be the real reason to migrate it to the cloud?
I don't know if that's the reason, like, if you have really, like, super strong compliance requirements, if that's the motivation to move to the cloud. But if you have other requirements that it's, like, makes sense to move to the cloud, and then you have the compliance one that you have to just adhere to, then yeah, clouds might solve your issues. There is a sovereign cloud from GCP. I don't know the offer from AWS that much, or Azure definitely has something as well. So they even, like, are able to save. Then the services are limited because sometimes they are managed from the US, and there are requirements that even, like, personally operating those managed services or serverless things does have to be from Europe. And there are services that could be sold that way or operated on Google Cloud, but others not. but definitely. So if the case is strong for going for cloud, at least GCP has solution for that. I believe pretty nice one.
Yeah, on security, I love security just for fun. I'm not the expert, but I love it for fun. And imagine that you are like you are kind of startup grew on your servers, which are running somewhere in that room, right? Then the easiest way to hack it and get your data, which are super secure for you and regulated, go to this Wi-Fi access point, put whatever there, and sniff the traffic, get access, very easy. This you cannot do easily in a cloud. Like all the clouds are providing you with the compliance. I've been doing like PCI DSS, right? This is about handling the credit cards whenever you pay. Then the easiest and best way was to go AWS functions, because at that point you have no servers. That means the auditors comes to you, to your company, it's like, where is your antivirus? Man, I have no antivirus, I have no servers, you know? Like, this is the big power of the cloud. Like, you can leverage all these serverless things for compliance, because you are mitigating a lot of the scope of the auditor. He cannot find some things on their serverless, and Google AWS, they will provide you with all the compliance resources. They will give you all the documents of the shared responsibility system where, okay, this hardware, Google or AWS is assuring that it's safe. This layer, Google and AWS is assuring it's safe. And this is a little piece of code where you need to assure it's safe. Then you are limiting your scope a lot with cloud compared to the server you have in that room. Then security is like a huge topic and huge advantage. And you mentioned HIPAA or something like that. This is, every cloud have these documents, you can download them, you can access them. And the auditor will be super happy because they will just read tens of pages of documents and they will say, yeah, they have everything. Compared to even your like, if you are running in this data center here in Prague, it's again much more complicated to get all the paperwork that, yes, I am making sure no one have access to my servers, only these employees, blah, blah. In cloud, you have the identity aware proxies and you have like identity whatever. You know, you have everything audited. The auditor just goes, queries your logs from the audits, and he's super happy.
Yeah, that was a great point from Tomáš. Like when we have no servers, you don't need antivirus. But when you, what about storage and compliances? All clouds, I guess, AWS and Azure, and of course GCP, they are compliant to GDPR in Europe and to US laws in US, and they compliant to all the kind of required ICO, and not only required but optional also. And what I can say, yeah, everything is transparent in cloud. You have these audit logs for everything, and you have these like automated controls over the whole your organization in Google Cloud. So it's very transparent and.
Yeah, maybe I would add a little bit. Like on Google, I don't know, I believe AWS have something similar. There is like security command center where you just go, you log in, it scans your environment and gives you what is compliant, what is not, with what. And it really simplifies what you are doing in the cloud. If you combine this with tools like Drata, you are amazing, you are almost done. And I'm not saying that serverless is unhackable. If you know Marek Schottel, he can sit here hours and hours explain you how he hacked lambdas. You still are responsible for your application, and what you are doing is just much more complicated for the attacker.
I think that one of the biggest advantages of the cloud is that, like, if you have a requirement to run in multiple regions due to various regulations, like, it doesn't really matter. But often you have a requirement, like if you have US customers that they have to have data in the US, and if you have European customers, they have to have data in Europe. we often have companies that are just starting out that are running single region, and they often at some point will gain a customer in a different region. Like we recently had a customer that wanted to they signed a big customer in Brazil, and they had the requirement that they need to have infrastructure in Brazil. And one of the biggest advantages I think of cloud is that each of the cloud vendors has a lot of regions that you can use, and you can use unified infrastructure across all of these regions. So if you do it properly, and if you have the solution defined as infrastructure as code in Terraform or whatever, it took us 3 hours to build a completely new Brazilian infrastructure based on the same code base. So it required very little effort to actually spin up a new region and enable the customer to open up a market there. So I think one of the biggest advantages of doing it in a big cloud vendor is that you can easily expand to other regions using the same services that you're using with your main environment.
Yeah, it usually works, but there are also small states, for example Croatia or Greece, and we have some companies working in a gambling business, or they call it games, but it's actually gambling, right? And they have you also have server in Croatia or in Greece. And for example, in Athens, there is there should be a data center from Google. It's not there yet. So then the cloud isn't the answer. So there are cases when the compliance basically permits to use cloud. And the solution for having multi-cloud multi-region deployment is fine unless you have to share the data or database especially. Because then you anyway either read still from one region or have some strange replication stuff that you can use queues, etc. But still, the use case really gets much more complicated. Of course, if there are completely independent solutions, then it's super simple. If you have to have one database to which both of the regions have to write, then it gets much more complicated. And again, regarding the GDPR, some things are simple, but we have few customers from Czech government, and they are more strict. Really, that the team operating the Google Cloud, even it's super secure, doesn't have to have access, because sometimes they elevate their rights to access things in case there is an outage of the service. And so they would ensure that this personnel is from Europe or European Union. So, but there are services for that. However, as I said, they are a bit limited and you pay a bit more, but it works.
Yeah, you put me to one question I discussed today with few people. Imagine that you are a startup in let's say, Czech Republic, and you are scaling up, and you are staying in Europe, right? Then you have two options, and you want to open, let's say, 2-3 new markets like Germany and whatever else, Poland. Would you do your application the way to handle all the countries, or would you deploy everything per country? What is your recommended approach and why? And imagine that the effort to develop either A or B is kind of the same. Which one do you like more? Create 3 clusters or keep everything in one?
Especially, I believe that Europe is that small that one data center, if there are requirements for extra high availability, so extra region availability, in case the whole region goes down, which I believe never ever happened, but in case it will, then you have another one. Like for banks, sometimes it's the case. But that is not that the case. Then I would prefer to have just one region and serve everything from that. Especially you could pay for that in AWS and in GCP as well. But there's more default choice is that the premium level networking, which basically brings all your requests through those paid network of AWS, or GCP, or Azure to the endpoint closest to the ISP of the customer, basically the requester, and then the lags will be rather short, small, so then you get rid of the burden that having more stacks, because more of everything means more work always. So yeah, that's my advice.
Yeah, I would ask you what's your requirement? If you're building a high-performance trading application, you probably want to have individual stacks close to whatever you're trading with. if you are able to like fulfill all of the regulations and you can have US and EU customers in a single database, you can run it in Ireland, that you will be pretty happy, I think. So I believe it depends on the requirement. Like if your requirement is high performance and low latencies to certain regions, I think it would be worth to have individual stacks in different regions. If not, like it will be much less effort to, not to build, but to maintain. I think like it's way more effort to maintain individual regions than to build them. I would stick to one region.
I feel, sorry, I have a feeling that you somehow trust the cloud providers, that they keep data where they say. So there is one question in the Slido on the topic on the topic of data sovereignty. How can European clients be sure that their data is not stored on a US-owned control cloud? Is the last one.
Yeah, then how you could know that your data center is not doing that thing right? But they are independent auditors. They say that they are not doing that right, and that's all I could say about that. I know that, for example, if I work for a company that was a really good customer of Azure, then there was like each year there was like few tickets that you could see the data center. And I haven't been there, but what I heard from my colleagues is that, like, even like actually the view around the data center is like super secured. So even if you like do a 3 steps detour, let's say, then they really like threaten you, will leave you out of the rest of the view, because that's just, we have to, like, the security was really super strict. So yeah, I believe because even for them, like the reputation risk of not keeping to this will cost them billions of dollars. So they already have a good reason to do it like that. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, I believe, yeah, like, first of all, yes, you need to trust those independent auditors and so on and so forth. And in the end of the day, yes, it's all American-owned companies, right? It's Microsoft, it's Alphabet, it's Amazon. It's nothing else than American-owned companies. But I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, that, for example, Google and AWS have these like deals with European unions, that they have the entities and they have some additional audits to ensure that European data are staying in Europe, blah, blah. And in the end of the day, it's your data. And what I would do if I'm so scared that my data will leak, I would use the user encryption keys, right? You can use like S3 or GCS bucket or VMs and pay for the extra security on top of it. You can have hardware which is just yours. You are not sharing anything with the other people running on the cloud. You can use the encryption keys to encrypt your data, and you are the only one having access to the key. Whenever you delete the key, Google and no one else will be able to decrypt it until they have some whatever superpower.
Yeah, I agree. Like it's part of all of the, I feel in AWS it's called well-architected framework. I'm not sure how it's called in the other vendors, but like you encrypt the data. I think automatically even now these days, it doesn't matter if it's a relational database, if it's an S3 bucket or whatever, you always encrypt it. And as you said, like I think it's a pretty good assumption that AWS has to follow a lot of audits, and like it's quite like we can be quite sure that I think they are following what they say.
Yeah, as you said, like every cloud have by default some encryption keys, and you can use your own. Like every cloud, like either AWS or Google, have the default keys, and you can use them and don't care about anything. If you are scared about your data, use your own keys, manage your own keys.
Yeah, and encrypt on your local machine, because if you encrypt in the cloud, then at least in the memory, the data are unencrypted. So if you are super scared, just use it as a storage of encrypted data, and then yeah, safe. But I believe the benefits of the cloud is basically gone, except for a DR. That's it.
Yeah, and you touched the point, right? You can have super secure cloud, but if your employee have unsecure machine, you are fucked anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree with this encrypting. If you're paranoid, if you have this requirement, go with your own cryptographic key, managed it by yourself, and the thing that I learned recently, confidential computing. So this is basically the thing is about encrypting data in use. You have encrypting data in rest, in transit, and with confidential space you have encrypting data in use. So only trusted workload could decrypt this data and see it. It is solved by special AMD processors on the hardware level. So that's it.
Okay, you have time for last 3 questions. So I will just start with that. Does the migration to the cloud always means that your team will have to be a more DevSecOps? We just speak about the data, but what about the runtime?
I mean, it probably doesn't have to mean that, but I think it should. Like, if you are, when we discussed this previously, like if you are moving to the cloud, you probably are doing it for a reason, and you want to use the benefits of the cloud. So as part of the migration, I think if the team does not have experience with cloud technologies or like Kubernetes, serverless, whatever, they should take some time and like learn these things, or like we can support them in learning those things, because at the end it will enable them to work more efficiently and it will like make their life easier. So I think in general, I think you should like employ some of the DevSecOps practices.
Yeah, I would add just by the migrating to the cloud, whatever, just lift and shift, you are usually gaining a lot of security features by default, like we discussed it, like encryptions at rest, in transit, this kind of stuff you have in the clouds by default. Like every communication from your cloud run service deployed is behind HTTPS. You cannot just easily put this to HTTP until you are on Kubernetes and you really want to do it. All the data you have stored in cloud, whatever it is, BigQuery, S3, are encrypted. This, in many cases, you do not have on the bare metal. So you are running your Minio in default settings, and encryption, it's just not there. Then just moving to cloud, you will have a lot of security just by that. And does it mean that my team will be DevSecOps? You can name it whatever you want. All what depends is what the people do and what impact on the business it have. I personally hate what is DevOps 2023. Like there is a lot of tools to pick from. There is like 20 tools to write infrastructure as a code. There is 50 tools to secure environments. Then before you will do DevSecOps and follow all these amazing articles, spend the time to realize what you really want, what you really expect from the cloud and the people. Don't go with the latest, greatest article.
Yeah, I think it's about like a level of maturity in the cloud. If you're on the, if you just did the first step, you just did this first step. You don't really want to learn and implement and apply all these DevSecOps things. But with as you grow your maturity level in cloud, these things will help you to benefit cloud in the most way. That's it.
Yeah, and we also are getting back to the beginning, like having a good, solid landing zone with good governance. So not everybody has the full admin rights. You treat the security keys the right way, brings a lot, because it's super that it's auto-secured, but if your security keys are just somewhere in the gate or somewhere else, like that's not a good idea. So yeah, if you build like the solid base, then the security, I believe, will come basically out of the box. Of course, you could do like the shift left and have the variation of the code, and then check all the dependencies when you build the container, and then check that if the container that you build is signed and it's the one that is deployed. But for most of the cases, I don't believe necessary, but there is a space, and that is given by the clouds because they prepare those tools. Of course, they could be on premise as well, but I believe on the cloud they are like just at hand, so it's easy even for developers to just, hey, I think maybe we could use this because actually we are afraid that maybe we are using few old libraries, so these checks helps us. And also for the configuration, as we mentioned, like security command center or mix of services on AWS, like 3 or 4 have to put together the features of security command center. Could check like your configurations if you haven't opened too much ports or the entitlements aren't too big or you should limit them. There are even like free tools for that. So yeah, if you put some effort to it, you could make the cloud much secure, but I believe the solid base, solid governance on the landing zone is the first thing. And without that, nothing else will save you, I believe.
Yeah, I would just add, if you go with the amazing landing zone and you have the basics in place, that means like the identity-aware proxy and ensure that your people have two-factor and this kind of basic stuff, the biggest security hole you have is your application anyway, not the infrastructure. Then focus there as well, don't focus just on the infra.
Yeah, I think that often it is about, like you call it landing zone, I call it like building abstractions, like for the developers. Yeah, like as a developer, you cannot like comprehend all of the things in the cloud native world. Like there's so many of them that there's no one person that can handle all of it. So often it is about building a solid landing zone and building abstractions for the developers, so they do not really have to care about like security aspects of the things that much, because the security tooling handles that for them. They do not have to care about how the application is getting deployed because the CI/CD pipeline handles that for them, and they do not have to like figure out how to get the logs from the application or how to figure out what's going on because the observability stack handles that for them. So I think for us, it's always about providing like a reasonable layer of abstraction for the development teams, because that enables them to focus on their things and not on managing infrastructure. Because like doing things DevOps doesn't mean that you have to know all of the technologies involved.
We have a nice question about the identity providers. So with latest security breach in Okta, how how to protect your cloud deployment from leaks in identity providers? Any idea? No, the Okta is one of the most used solution for it. So
Yeah, still, I believe the second factor should save you. So yeah, multi-factor authentication is, at least for the key accounts, is definitely a thing. And yeah, if services like Okta are hacked, then yeah, there is not much to do, right? And it could happen to anybody, right?
Yeah, I would say in this case, usually have this, like, as you said, like multi-factor, this kind of stuff, and have the recovery procedures, have the processes, how to recover from this. If I see a leak of credential of my all employees to internet, what I do? Just be ready for it. But this you are dealing with actual size of a company, not as a small startup of 5. And if you are relying on whatever third party, right? It does not need to be identity provider. It can be, like we all know the Terraform, right? They have their own Terraform cloud where you have the state, and if you are not smart enough, you have secrets there, right? If HashiCorp gets hacked, they have access to this, and then you need to have the procedures how to rotate the passwords, how to rotate the secrets. That's the only thing what can basically ensure that you are secure again.
Yep. Agree with the guys. And in Google Cloud, there is a thing like, don't remember how exactly it named, but basically this is context access management. You can define context from where these identities could have access to your internal infrastructure. So you basically can define network from where these internal services could be accessed. You can define location, and even you can define like devices from what your services can be accessed. So there is like more levels of security in cloud.
So I wanted to move to last question. We in past we somehow not the last on the page. We somehow was agreed in previous discussion that the serverless can provide us more security, but maybe it's not right now in the phase where it should be. So I'd like to ask you about your ideas for the future of the serverless. So there is the question: how far can you can get just writing business logic and running it serverless without knowing networking, Kubernetes, subnet, and C? What things are crucial to know?
You don't want to. You don't need to know Kubernetes at all if you want to go to with serverless, because in its nature, Kubernetes is like the one of the most infrastructure relied knowledge thing. I hope you get me. And you can go networking, subnets. Also, those things you can have, you should have some level of knowledge, but it's not the serverless things are already by default up some kind integrated to these virtual private clouds you have. You don't, most of the time they have these firewalls, predefined firewalls, and you can go serverless with some services, cloud functions. Try, and you when you deploying cloud function, there are a lot of like controls. You pretty self-explaining, like if you want to be it open to public or no, and what things are crucial to know. You should know just like to just basic things like what triggers, something about triggers, if this is an HTTP trigger or if this is some event triggering your function.
So I believe that a certain level of general technical skills is always good, basically for anybody, so not to be lost in a certain part. Of course, it doesn't have to be like a super expert, and you cannot be an expert in all the fields, was already also mentioned here. If you go like purely serverless, so basically the networking is more or less out of the box, because all those serverless things is running in the VPC that you do not own, and if you use DNS, then basically you could call the services that way. So yeah, of course, if you scale more and, for example, would like to use a relation database, then you need no networking. But if you start small and grow, and you will learn on the way, that's definitely the way. And of course, like, we are all from partners companies, so if you are afraid you don't know enough, there is not an easy way. Just contact us and we could discuss that with you. But yeah, because as already discussed, even for the landing zone, right? Like, if you start it the wrong way, then fixing it will cost you much more than to ask for a good device at the beginning. So yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think that you can go a long way just with serverless, but at some point, I think that you will need to focus on other things as well, because you will like come across a use case that's not suitable for serverless. Like, you can, at some point, you want to handle data analytics, for example. You at that point you will use probably different kinds of databases, and like it involves some level of networking. You will maybe want to have some long-running jobs that are not that suitable for serverless functions. So I think at some point you will need to also involve some other tooling than just the serverless offerings, but you can go a pretty long way. And I agree that what you said, like when I was talking about building abstractions, it can also involve like involving some other party that has a lot of experience that can build a layer of abstraction for you. Like, as you said, like, we are all from partner companies, and that can mean that you can offload some of this on somebody else. And often, like, it's a very good business decision to do it like this, because at the end, like, you will not spend a year on building something that you will then discard.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I know companies which run on AWS functions, and the whole business is built on top of it, and they don't have anything else, and they are happy with it, because for the amount of workload they have and the scalability they need, is just amazingly suitable and they are making millions. Then you can build the whole amazing business on top of it. On the other side, I know company here from Czech Republic, which is leveraging like 90% of their workloads is running on Cloud Run. And it's handling thousands and thousands of requests per minute. It's not small workloads, it's like big ones. Then you can build huge applications on serverless if we talk on compute. If we talk about databases, that's like a different story. You need to pick which one scales, SQL, NoSQL, whatever, that's different discussion.
Maybe one more thing to add, like often you will want to use some community tools, like from the CNCF landscape, for example, and that will sort of force you to like not run it as a serverless tools, because like running Prometheus as a serverless offering, it can be hard. So often when you want to utilize some of the community tooling, which there's a lot of for different use cases, like that can be the step where you introduce something else than serverless.
Yeah, and you touched like kind of sensitive point, right? You want to go Prometheus, but why with serverless, right? If I'm starting a new business or like I'm kind of like SMB or whatever, I don't maybe need Prometheus and Grafana and all these fancy thingies on top of it. I don't need Datadog or whatever. I can leverage what the cloud's giving me, like the operational suite. They are, with serverless, you have amazing features by default. You have tracing, you have logging, you have monitoring. You just set up some alerts on top of it and you are basically done. You don't need to deploy all these 12 services to make your application running, and just because it's nice, right? And we represent it here.
Yeah, I agree. Like, but at some point, like it can be useful to run it yourself. Like, for example, when we talk about data analytics, we also had a use case where like a customer wanted to scrape data from 50 sources, and they wanted to use some tooling that was only available using some open source tooling. So I agree that like it wouldn't make sense to run Prometheus for serverless functions. I agree with that, but like you can have valid use cases for using open source tooling, and that way you can integrate it within the stack, not as serverless.
Yeah. And again, like we creating around like using all the serverless stacks, even like the native logging, monitoring, and other stuff, basically really stitch you to that cloud vendor.
Yeah, but for example, in Prometheus, right, you mentioned it. You can go and buy Prometheus serverless, like the fully managed Prometheus in Google, if it's enough for the amount of workload you have, because at scale it's expensive like hell. But if it's just about like having some metrics there, then like, yeah, you can go also this way. And some of the other services and CNCF, they are also offering like fully managed solutions.
Yeah, even like
you can go to Google or AWS Marketplace and go and buy a Mongo Atlas and have serverless fully managed database, Mongo, which you know, bill on one bill from your cloud provider, and be happy. You don't need to manage these CNCF tools in the end of the day.
yeah, agree.
I have one thing to mention. What is really crucial, it sounds like easy serverless, but what you really want to think about is about identity access management within the project. You don't want to give your function like permissions to access some service account that could delete the whole project. You want to need basics of this identity and access management within the project.
So thank you, all of you. I think that we are in the phase that we can end this discussion. If there are any questions, so feel free to ask guys with some beers and foods on the networking part. So thank you one more time. So yes. And okay, I will provide you the quick space to do some summarize of this discussion about these topics. So.
Yeah, just key takeaway. I would like everyone, if you can, like give some key takeaway. For me, it's that what we discussed today is about compute and a little bit about databases, but where you will really see the big benefit of cloud, it's data. It's the amount of data it can handle, it's analytics, it's data warehouses, this kind of stuff. That's where the cloud is like unbeatable compared to our on-premise. Not just these compute VMs that everyone can do.
I think for me, the key takeaway would be like if you're considering moving to the cloud, think about why you want to do it, because like often people just want to move to the cloud because like it's a requirement or like it's cool. So for me, the key takeaway would be like think about what moving to the cloud will give you and what like how much effort it will take and how will it affect your company. So
yeah, for me, it's like if you're considering migration, really plan it, consider all the pros and cons because there will be a lot of them, and don't be afraid to look for help because sometimes at the end it's not that complex, but starting it right helps you quite a lot on the way.
And for me, I think the thing is the educating how the cloud works and what possibilities it offers. A lot of things cloud could solve for you out of the box, and you just don't need to reinvent the wheel. And really, a lot of things could cloud solve just out of the box. That's it. Thank you.
So thank you. One more time, thanks Tomáš, Lubomír, Martin, and Igor for amazing talks. So thank you, guys.